as the UN gets ready for an emergency meeting on Syria. The question many people are asking is, what's next for the country? Well, Syrians and, of course, the world are still reacting to the stunning fall of Syria's Assad regime, the long and brutal rule of Bashar al-Assad, ending after rebels swept into the capital of Damascus on Sunday. Well, that is the sound of celebration as the rebels declare Syria is free from its former dictator after 13 years of civil war. Russian state media and an official source say that Assad, a key ally of Vladimir Putin, fled to Moscow with his family, where they have been granted asylum. Well, these images were inconceivable just a few days ago. You are looking at what we are told are people looting former President Bashar al-Assad's official office in Damascus, walking off with whatever they can carry. My colleague, CNN's chief international correspondent Clarissa Ward, reporting from the streets of Damascus as Syrians take in their new reality.
You can see there are a lot of people out on the streets today. It's not scenes of celebration. It's not scenes of looting like we were seeing today. Now people are trying to make sure that they have stocked up on all the supplies that they might need. Take a look at this line here. We're outside a bakery. These people say they've been waiting more than half an hour, some of them. They're waiting for bread. We've seen lines like this around the city. People are lining up for cash. They're lining up for gas. They are trying to make sure that they have enough food to ride out this transitional period where nobody really knows what's going to happen. Now you can see behind me at the end of the road there, that is the central bank of Syria. Yesterday there was extensive looting there. A lot of people in the city started to feel a little bit concerned that this was going to be a chaotic period. Then more rebels arrived in the capital. The looting appears to have stopped. It does seem very calm on the streets. Of course, there are many people who are elated that Bashar al-Assad is finally gone. But there is also the day-to-day that people need to focus on to ensure that they have enough bread, enough gas, enough cash, enough supplies to get them through this tenuous transitional period. Clarissa Ward, CNN, Damascus.
Well, CNN's Paula Hancock joins me now, and you could, forgive so many Syrians for continuing these celebrations sort of long into the night and into the morning. But 24 hours on, it is remarkable, a sense of calm in Damascus, but also a sense of uncertainty about what is to come. And the question is whether the rebels at this point can convert what is this extraordinary moment into a new and fairer society, Paula.
It's the key question, and it is the answer that nobody knows at this point. It's the question that the experts are asking, that people on the street in Syria are asking as well. Because what you've got here is an extremely complex situation. You're not talking about rebel group, you're talking about rebel groups. You have a myriad of different anti-Assad entities that were part of this dramatic and remarkable takeover of Syria. So the fact is, who is in control now? We know that HTS is considered the vanguard, it's considered the biggest group, but the question is whether or not they can consolidate the other groups that are with them. We heard from John Kirby from the National Security Council, and he spoke to CNN, and John Berman, our anchor, said to him, who's running Syria? And he said it's an open question. He said they are trying to figure out that themselves at this point. So that's where we are. He also pointed out that the Biden administration believe that they're saying the right things. That they're saying that they are going to be protecting the different minorities. You have Christians, Alawites, Sunni, Shia, Druze, and they're saying the right things, but they simply don't know at this point whether the deeds are going to match those words.
The speed of this sort of downfall, as it were, this past week, I think shocked everybody. But I think it would be naive to believe that behind the scenes and back channeling wasn't going on, that countries around the world who have a sort of a a stake in the wider security of Syria going forward, not just the Syrians, but countries around the region and beyond, weren't aware that there was something afoot, Israel being one of those. Israel says it struck weapons systems in Syria to prevent them from falling into the hands of extremists. And let's be quite clear, some of these groups, including HTS, are extremist groups, have been affiliated with extremist groups in the past. HTS itself has a history associated with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So how might the balance of power look in the Middle East going forward? There is a real change in the architecture here. This story of Syria is not just a story of Syria and Syrians. Extremely important that we consider them in the first instance, but there is a wider story here as well.
Absolutely. I mean, what happens in Syria does not stay in Syria. You look at the neighbourhood, and Israel is a good example. There was no love lost between the Israeli government and Assad. They knew that weapons were flowing from Iran through Syria to Lebanon and to Hezbollah. So there was no love lost there. But the fact is, they had a fairly secure border, which they now no longer have. So we have seen in that buffer zone between Israel and Syria, Israeli troops are now there. This is effectively Syrian territory. They are stationing themselves there because the Syrian regime military left. And they knew that if there is a vacuum there, then there could be something far worse that would be right on their border. You see Turkey, for example. Turkey has been empowered by what has happened because, as we understand it, Turkey had a fair amount of influence in what happened, a fair amount of support to some of these groups. And there are some of these groups that came through that America supports as well. So there is definitely a lot of manoeuvring behind the scenes. There's one obvious loser, of course, and that's Iran. This is not what Iran wanted. But for many of the other countries, they certainly would have been aware of something happening. They may have been integral into that happening. But of course, they're watching quite carefully and with some trepidation now as well as to what the next Syria does look like.
And what that looks like will have an influence on the wider region and beyond. It's good to have you. Thank you. Paula Hancock's in Abu Dhabi with me. Well, the Kremlin not offering up many details on the whereabouts of the former Syrian President Bashar al-Assad after the ousted president was granted asylum in Russia on Sunday. A Kremlin spokesperson refused to comment publicly on Russia's decision to grant that to Assad and his family, adding that there are no planned face-to-face meetings between Assad and the Russian president on Putin's official schedule. That was how it was described. There was a sign of the changing times as the opposition flag was hoisted above the embassy, though, in Moscow.